Viridian, The Green Guide, written by Clouds, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 89, Aggression. Shota was just finishing up his reports for the night and was looking forward to a few well-deserved hours of sleep when Bakugo slammed open the door to the police station. He didn't even say hello to Sansa at the desk before storming back to Tsukashi's station. Shota heaved a heavy sigh and pushed the last of his paperwork away. Katsuki Bakugo, it is literally the middle of the night. Is there any reason this couldn't wait until school tomorrow? And what happened to your face? None of your business, hobo, Bakugo scoffed. And maybe because by the time school starts tomorrow, it might be too late? I don't know. It's pretty late right now, Amplifier teased. What are you doing out on a school night? Got a lead. Bakugo grumbled. Fine. Long story short, Ogawa woke up. I went out to look into something he told me, and I got stopped by a villain who warned me not to go to school tomorrow. Do you idiots see why maybe I wouldn't want to sit on that info? Tsukashi stared at him. He said what? She, actually, introduced herself as Himiko Toga. Bakugo rolled her eyes. She's a creepy psychopath, but where the info came from isn't as important as what we're going to do about it. From what Toga said, it's an organization, and they've recruited a lot of people. Toga? Shota groaned. Problem child. What is with you and attracting serial killers? Maybe it's just my winning personality. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Now, she wouldn't tell me exactly when or where, but I'm thinking the target's at least in the same neighborhood as UA, if not the school itself. And she said tomorrow, so that at least gets us a window, which is better than nothing. Tsukashi sighed. Any idea why she volunteered the info? It came up. Bakugo shrugged. She sought me out and kept going on and on about how Stain thinks very highly of me and all that crap. Then, when she realized I didn't know about the attack, he mumbled something that Shota couldn't quite make out. What was that? Ugh! She said something about how I was too cute to die without her watching or some shit. Bakugo scowled, a slight blush on his face. I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was creepy, all right? Aww. Amplifier held her hands over her heart. Our widow hero gets shy when girls flirt with him. Amplifier. Do I need to remind you that Toga is known for killing most of her crushes? Tsukashi rubbed at the bridge of his nose. But that checks out, actually. Warning you about an attack she wouldn't be a part of is exactly something she would do. Which unfortunately means that this info is probably trustworthy. Wonderful. I already told you that. Bakugo crossed his arms. Now what are we going to do? Cancel school or something? Only as a last resort, Shota said. I'll talk to Nedzu, but the PR nightmare canceling classes this late would cause means that we'll need to look at our options first. We'll start by talking to the commission and getting some more heroes stationed in the area for the day. Tsukashi said, UA has the highest security around, so once all the students are inside the gates, they should be safe. The biggest issue will be before and after school, and maybe during lunches. It's easier to make students stay on campus for lunch than it is to cancel class, Shota said, grabbing his phone to call Nedzu. Get some sleep, Kachan. The rest of us aren't going to be able to. Amplifier stopped him before he could get too far. Oh, and you said Ogawa woke up already? That's amazing. Yeah, Bakugo huffed. At least he told me who it was he wanted to save. Some guy named Kumo. Used to have a cloud quirk or something like that, but Ogawa said those monsters put them both through the same thing, so that's probably not the case anymore. Whatever. See you tomorrow, losers. Shota froze. He was dead. Had been. For 10 years now. There was no way he was alive, and even if that was possible, All for One wouldn't have any logical reason to hold on to him for this long. It had to be a coincidence. That was the only possibility that made sense. But what if it wasn't? By the time he managed to shake himself out of his stupor, Bakugo was already out the door, and Tsukashi was looking at him with concern. Eraserhead, are you all right? I'm fine. Shota took a deep breath. He could worry about Shirakumo later, after he made sure that none of his students followed his example and died before they could graduate. Come on, we've got brats to protect. Katsuki was starting to relax, if only slightly. The trip to school had been extraordinarily uneventful, even if there were more heroes signing autographs than usual, and Tsukashi was right about UA's security being practically impregnable. The increased hero presence outside would be able to stop any attack on the gates before it really began, and even if there was an attack, it would be at the main school, not at some building tucked away in the far corner of campus. That was probably why All Might wasn't coming on the field trip. They needed their most powerful hero close and at the ready for if and when the attack happened, even if the official reason for his absence was special heroic obligations. Katsuki stared out the window and half listened to his classmates' conversations as they made their way to wherever the rescue training exercise was. Hey, Kaminari, I've been meaning to ask. Jiro leaned over the seat to talk to Dunce Face. When we were preparing for the exercise, you said you didn't have any long-range attacks. But I'd say magnetism is pretty long-range, don't you think? That's kinda a new application of my quirk. Kaminari stuttered out. I knew about it, obviously. I just didn't mention it because I hadn't had time to practice, you know? I didn't think I'd be able to rely on it, but then adrenaline kicked in, so... Katsuki rolled his eyes. Izuku had probably come up with the idea during one of his ramblings, and they just hadn't gotten around to trying it yet. When they'd been kids, Izuku had had a million ideas of how to use explosion better, but most of the time Katsuki's problem wasn't that he was too busy, it was that he was too stubborn. He should probably ask the nerd for some tips now that he was learning not to be an idiot. The training facility was excessively large, but then again, that seemed to be a trend for UA. 13 was already waiting outside, and Katsuki couldn't help a small grin at the way Uraraka fangirled over one of her favorite heroes. He had thought that Izuku would probably have done the exact same thing. But with how often Viridian worked with heroes, he might not freak out the same way he would have when they were little kids. It was just one more thing that Katsuki honestly didn't know about him anymore. After 13 led them all inside, they lectured them on the harmful potential of their quirks, a subject that Katsuki was all too familiar with. He didn't tune them out, but he did take the time to look over the facility, just so that he knew what he was walking into. There were multiple disaster zones, probably under the teacher's control, and each of them housed a different type of disaster that they would face in the field. It was good that they were focusing on rescue and not just combat. It would help them all be better, more rounded heroes. But with how much UA had obviously spent on this building, he hadn't been expecting any electrical glitches. The lights flickered slightly before going out, and he glanced toward Kaminari, but he seemed just as confused as everyone else. Hey, it wasn't me this time, I swear. It's probably residual issues from the last blackout, Uraraka suggested. My parents work construction, and they've had problems like that before, when fuses have blown out and stuff. I don't think... 13 said hesitantly. Katsuki's eye caught on something odd near the fountain, and he vaguely heard the others speculating that it was all part of the exercise. But with Toga's warning, he wasn't about to count on that. These were the villains he'd been warned about. Somehow they'd gotten inside without having to pass through the gate, and chosen to attack a small class rather than the main school. Katsuki was about to shift into a fighting stance when the small spot of purple mist expanded, and he realized who was coming through. Stand back, Eraser said. Those are... You have got to freaking be kidding me! Katsuki screamed. He stalked forward, causing a good third of the villains to instinctively take a step back as they recognized him. Seriously? What the hell do you damn idiots think you're doing? If you're gonna do illegal shit, at least be freaking smart about it. Attacking UA, the hotbed for both heroes and hero students? Seriously? One of the villains, some creepy-ass skin dude with hands all over him, who apparently thought he was the leader, gaped at him. What? What are you? Kurogiri, what is this NPC doing? Shut it, extra! Katsuki barked and made a beeline towards two of the villains in particular. And you two! Maki? Akiko? I thought you were better than this! You guys were doing so freaking well, too! Weren't you guys gonna leave all this shit behind for good? Well, Akiko stammered and looked at the ground, her pigtails going limp. You see, it's kind of complicated, and one thing led to another, and tell me you didn't go crawling back to that bitch-ass boyfriend of yours. Katsuki pointed at her accusingly. You promised that you were dumping his ass for good this time. Kachan. Maki started. Katsuki whipped around to face him. And you, huh? What's your excuse? I thought you were trying to make a nice life for that girlfriend of yours. It was odd seeing someone as large as Maki trying to make himself small. Even though he was wearing a full face mask, Katsuki could assume he looked just as embarrassed and discombobulated as Akiko did. Well, I mean, with an ugly quirk, it was more difficult than I thought to make ends meet. And you think I don't frickin' know that? Katsuki said. You think I haven't talked to enough of these extras to know how much discrimination can screw people over? Not to mention that I've been on the other side of this, remember? I helped perpetuate those stereotypes, for heaven's sake. But you're going to return to a life of crime or whatever? At least pick one that's not going to get you arrested. Denki watched open-mouthed as Bakugo stopped an entire horde of actual, real-life villains by giving them a tongue lashing. It was freaky enough that he had the courage to just straight up yell at a group of villains that were probably there to attack them. But what was really insane was that the villains were actually listening to him. A good third of them were looking at the floor like scolded children, and some of the others were whispering frantically to each other. They know him, Jiro said numbly. The ones who don't recognize him are asking whether it's that Kachan or not. Apparently it is. Denki turned back to watch as Bakugo kept laying into the villains. Why would you ever think this was a good idea? The villains he was talking to muttered something in response that made Bakugo roll his eyes. Yeah, and let me guess, a good chunk of that excellent pay was going to come after the job. You can't tell me you actually fell for that crap. Bakugo gestured to the man with creepy hands all over his body, who seemed to be the head villain. Take one look at that guy and tell me that he's not bitch-ass broke and living in his parents' basement. He isn't intending to pay you because you're all going to get caught. Is he roasting the villains? Uraraka asked. Aizawa heaved a tired-sounding sigh. Let's just use the distraction for what it is. Everyone get out the doors and start making your way back to UA. I'll stay with Kachan and make sure he doesn't do anything even more stupid. But Ida started to argue, but Denki cut him off as Aizawa ran down the stairs to assist Bakugo. He was the class president, and he really didn't know what exactly he was supposed to do in this situation, but he did know that he was supposed to keep his classmates safe. If we stick around, we're just more targets to distract 13 and Aizawa. So, also, the alarms aren't going off, so we need to find a way to contact the school and let them know we're being attacked. Ida, you run ahead. He started urging everyone forward. The power was out, and the doors were electric, so he could probably power them himself, and if that didn't work, then hopefully his magnetism would be strong enough to tear them off the hinges. He had to get everyone out and keep them safe. This really wasn't what he had in mind when Aizawa had mentioned a rescue exercise. Kachan didn't have a plan. He was just disappointed and angry. But it was working. Maki and Akiko, as well as a good number of the other villains, seemed to be realizing how idiotic attacking UA was, and were looking at the ground embarrassed by their own stupidity, while others were nodding along with Katsuki's rant and finally starting to see he had a point. The weird purple mist that come through was still covering the plaza, which gave him an idea. You know what? Just get out of here. Katsuki huffed in frustration. Maybe you'll get lucky and the heroes will just chalk this whole thing up to momentary insanity. It was a few long moments before a few started turning around and heading back into the portal that had brought them. He turned to Maki and Akiko, who wilted under his glare. Sorry, Karchan. Maki grumbled as he turned around. We didn't think it'd be your class, but still. Yeah, sorry, Akiko added. See you later, yeah? Katsuki gave a sharp nod. You better count on it. She winced, but turned around and followed Maki and the smart ones away. Katsuki stared after them, trying not to show any shock on his face as he realized just how many villains had taken him up on his offer. He hadn't been expecting that to actually work. Not that he wasn't relieved it had. Cheater! A yell from beside him was the only warning he got before the creepy hand guy launched himself at him. Kuragiri, keep our party from leaving! If their hearts are not in it, they are more likely to betray us to the heroes than to fight for our cause, the mist said. Our remaining forces are stronger now that the weak links are gone, young Shigaraki. Katsuki warily watched as Shigaraki scratched his neck. He'd been lucky to dodge that first attack, especially since he had no idea what his quirk was or what those hands had to do with it. And he wasn't looking forward to what would happen if Shigaraki decided he was a cheater after all. So far, it looked like this Kuragiri mist guy was the dad friend and Shigaraki was the leash kid. But he'd been a leash kid. He knew how easy it was to blow through those limits without looking back, so he needed to be ready to fight. A loud crash sounded near the entrance and Shigaraki swore, Kuragiri, you useless... If you weren't our exit gate, I'd dust you right now. Stop those brats from escaping. I'll wreck the griefer. Nobu! End of chapter.